Hello and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report on NTD Television, where we bring you the latest news straight from our nation's capital. I'm your host, Steve Lance, and here's a look at some of the stories we have coming up for you today. After over 24 hours, Interstate 95 in Virginia has finally reopened. Senator Tim Kaine, who was also stranded with hundreds of other drivers, says that this was a challenge for survival. Capitol Hill lawmakers are prepping for a big day of events marking 1 year since January 6th. We look at how the security has changed over the past year, and we have the latest details on the DOJ's ongoing investigations into that day. And Texas Congressman Michael Cloud joins us to weigh in on big tech censorship and the recent banning from Twitter of his colleague, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. As schools are struggling to remain open amid surging Omicron cases, experts warn that closing schools is more risky for young people than COVID. The snowstorm on Monday stranded hundreds of drivers on Interstate 95 in Virginia. After about 24 hours, the 50-mile stretch of highway reopened last night. All disabled vehicles have finally been removed. Virginia transportation officials said motorists were stuck overnight, partly because of disabled trucks blocking the way in icy conditions. Senator Tim Kaine was one of them.
You know, it was kind of a survival challenge. I mean, you're trying not to run out of gas. And it's like turn on the heater, full blast, heat the car up, turn it off, and then try to catch some sleep. In about 20 or 30 minutes, it gets so cold in the car, then you have to do it again.
Virginia Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger says that such a situation is unacceptable and called for an investigation into what went wrong. The snowstorm also halted an Amtrak passenger train for more than 30 hours in Virginia, and over 400,000 customers in the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast were left without power. The Biden administration is trying to keep schools open amidst this new wave of Omicron, but teachers' unions are pushing back. Data expert Liberty Vittert warns that closing schools is more risky for young people than COVID. In her article on The Hill published Wednesday, Professor Vittert gave some analysis on the data of depression rates and the number of young Americans reported having serious thoughts of suicide. She concluded that shutting down our schools will clearly put young people's mental health at risk. The Biden administration is also urging schools to remain open, with more testing and vaccinations available.
Our expectation is for schools to be open full-time for students, for in-person learning. We remember the impact of school closures on students last year, and our science is better. We have better tools.
But Cardona also recognizes there may still be some bumps in the road. In the state of Florida this week, thousands of teachers and students have been absent as Omicron continues to spread. And in San Francisco, more than 600 teachers and aides were absent on Tuesday due to surging infection. And in Chicago, school officials canceled classes today following a teachers' union vote to shift back to virtual learning due to a rise in CCP virus cases. Twitter, Facebook, and Google have just went through another round of purging voices that they say don't conform to their policies. However, the lines remain blurred as they have not offered any specifics. We have Texas Congressman Michael Cloud with us here to discuss. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Sure, it's good to be here with you.
I want to start by asking you about one of your fellow colleagues in the House, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. As you know, she has been permanently banned from Twitter without any clear explanation. How concerning is this that a member of the United States Congress can be censored without pointing to anything specific that they may have done wrong?
Well, it's extremely concerning, especially for a publicly held company and a company that has the platform that Twitter has to discriminate based on views that they like or don't like. Obviously, my understanding, she's just posting data that's readily available on CDC websites. And so for us to see that kind of information banned is really troubling.
Now, Congressman, is there any real solution to put big tech in check? It doesn't seem like Section 230 has been making any headway.
Well, one thing I think these companies need to realize is that Section 230 was meant to protect the companies, specifically in case there was some misinformation posted, to protect the company from liability. What it doesn't protect the company from is from intentional discrimination against contrary views that they don't like. And so that's what we see going on right now. You know, I had a pastor email me the other day, and he simply posted a beautiful scripture from Psalms 139 that talks about a child being formed in the womb, and talks about how God sees that and it's special and all that. It's a beautiful passage, and that was banned on Facebook, you know, and so we're seeing discriminatory practices against views that it's not about science anymore. And that's what's really disturbing about this is not the enemies of science in this are the peoples who are trying to silence discussion on something that's really new and still developing.
Speaking of the science, I want to ask you about the vaccine mandates. I'm hearing from more and more vaccinated Americans that they're becoming skeptical of the mandates and policies because after being vaccinated, they've since contracted the virus, and in the early stages, they were told that they would be protected from contracting COVID. Do you see a situation where these mandates lose steam, or has it passed the point of no return?
I'd like to think that we'll be able to get to the point where we'll be able to bring really scientific data into these discussions, because as you're saying, we were told initially that, hey, you get the vaccine, conversation's over, you're protected. We now know that's not the case. And again, the data's still developing on this. This is relatively new science, and so we need to get back to those kind of discussions. And the fact that these big pharma companies are protected from any sort of liability while we are mandating in many times the usage on certain populations within the United States is very, very troubling. You know, if you get an aspirin, which has been around, we know is relatively safe, you still have a disclaimer on it. Well, that's not being provided for these sort of things, not even the information of potential side effects. And then there's no recourse right now for people to avail themselves of any sort of harm done to them.
Congressman, I want to ask you, do you think to a certain extent that the way the public health officials have handled this will have an effect on the way the public trusts them going forward?
Sure, absolutely. You know, the fact that the science or the talking points have continued to change, that the goalposts have continued to move, that we started off with 14 days and then, you know, that got a little longer. You know, people were willing to provide grace at the beginning, but now we know a whole lot more that we didn't know then. And what we're seeing is that these mandates are being pushed without the data to back them up. Often the push is for information that sometimes is contrary to the data. You know, there's absolutely no discussion about natural immunity. And I'm sure if Big Pharma stood to gain billions of dollars because of natural immunity, we would see huge advocacy for it. Or not for it in the sense of you don't want to contract COVID, but an understanding of that's part of this conversation, or should be part of this conversation. You know, some people are healthy, have survived it, and you know, many don't have the negative effects that tragically we have seen some have. And so this should be a well-rounded discussion that's centered on data, that's centered on science, and sadly it's been politicized.
Congressman Michael Cloud, thank you.
Thank you very much.
On Tuesday, Democratic Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence became the 25th House Democrat to announce retirement. Lawrence, the only African-American member of Congress representing Michigan, thanked her constituents for the opportunity to serve.
I am announcing that I will not be seeking re-election to Congress. I am incredibly grateful for the people of Michigan's 14th Congressional District who place their trust and vote in me. In me, just a little Black girl from the east side of Detroit. You made me your Congresswoman.
The 67-year-old served 8 years in Congress after 30 years of public service. The heavily Democratic Detroit district will likely choose another Democrat. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers are prepping for a big day of events marking 1 year since January 6th. Tomorrow, President Biden and Vice President Harris will speak. Today, the Department of Justice gave updates about their ongoing investigations into that day. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Melina Wisecup brings us those updates.
It's been a year since that chaos unfolded here at the nation's capital, and from the outside, things feel more relaxed now. That massive fence once surrounding the complex is gone now, but efforts to secure the nation's capital have been in the works all year. It's now easier to call in the National Guard in case of emergencies, and officers are upgrading their equipment. But one big problem still lingers. There's not enough officers on the job.
we have to increase our staffing. Realistically, I think it's going to take us at least 2 to 3 years to get up to our staffing in terms of hiring new officers.
The chief says he's short 457 officers, but that a plan is in the works to hire more. Aside from the staffing shortage, the department has made improvements in planning, intelligence, training, and equipment.
And most importantly, department-wide dissemination of all intelligence and critical information before all large and high-risk events.
Police are deployed with better equipment, and shields for crowd control are stationed around the Capitol campus. And all of these improvements have brought a relief to lawmakers.
But today, the Capitol is a whole lot safer than it was a year ago, and I commend him for his leadership. I feel safe walking around the halls of this hallowed building.
Investigations into the details of that day are still ongoing. 165 people have pleaded guilty. The Department of Justice has arrested and charged more than 700 people, and 325 have been charged with felonies for assaulting or interfering with officers, and 40 charged with felony conspiracies for obstruction.
The actions we have taken thus far will not be our last. The Justice Department remains committed to holding all January 6 perpetrators at any level accountable under law, whether they were present that day or were otherwise criminally responsible for the assault on our democracy.
Melina, there are multiple events going on here tomorrow. Could you walk us through some of these events and also tell us how law enforcement in D.C. is preparing for the day?
Steve, there are no concerning threats right now, and that's according to both the Capitol Police Chief and the Department of Homeland Security. But they are taking extra steps just to be safe. They have a deployment plan on hand if needed, and they're closely monitoring events. Tomorrow, both the president and the vice president will be here at the Capitol to give remarks, and later on in the day, lawmakers will hold a prayer vigil right here on these Capitol steps. Another event happening just across town over at that D.C. prison where those January 6th detainees are being held. A conservative group will hold a vigil to commemorate the lives of Ashley Babbitt and Roseanne Boyland. Now, this group has also said that those January 6th detainees in that jail right now are being mistreated. So that's another reason why they're holding that event, to honor those who they say have been politically persecuted. Steve?
Thanks for that, Melina. And former President Donald Trump last night canceled the news conference he had planned on January 6th. In a statement, Trump said he will instead discuss these important topics next Saturday at his rally in Arizona. Trump blamed the media for not covering Nancy Pelosi and Capitol Sergeant-at-Arms denied requests for the D.C. National Guard or military, which were made leading up to the Capitol breach. With the new year upon us, we take a look at what Americans will be paying at the pump in 2022. Energy expert Jerry Simmons is here with us to break it down. The Omicron variant now makes up almost all of the new COVID cases in the United States. That's according to the CDC. And in Maryland, Governor Larry Hogan has declared a state of emergency and has mobilized Maryland's National Guard due to a jump in the number of CCP virus cases and hospitalizations in that state. The USS Abraham Lincoln deployed this week from San Diego under the command of Captain Amy Bauernschmitz, the first woman to lead a nuclear carrier in U.S. Navy history. Hello and welcome back to NTD's Capitol Report. During the pandemic, supply chain has become a major issue that's impacting the American economy. At Wednesday's briefing, White House officials admit that there are still challenges to the American supply chain as Omicron continues to surge.
There's still challenges, and Omicron could surface more, which we're closely tracking.
During the White House press briefing, Porcari listed the progress he says they've made in fixing the supply chain, including being able to sustain a record-breaking holiday season and prioritizing moving up medical supplies at the nation's ports.
The impact of the Omicron variant may continue to unfold and will remain focused on supporting the public health response, building on our progress to help ease bottlenecks in critical supply chains and ensuring consumers have the goods they need.
Over the last few months, the Biden administration has been trying to address the supply chain issue. But according to experts, the crisis shows no sign of easing anytime soon. Energy prices have been nearing record highs in certain regions of the country. To find out the outlook of what you'll be paying at the pump, we have energy expert and CEO of Domestic Energy Producers Alliance, Jerry Simmons, to shed some light on the current state of oil. Jerry, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure, Steve. Happy to be here.
Now, Jerry, gas prices have gone up. Some experts are telling us that gas prices could go up a lot more in 2022, possibly to $4. What prices do you expect to see in this coming year?
Well, I think that's one of those questions that a lot of people will give you an answer right off the top of their head. But I'm going to start off by quoting Yogi Berra, the old Yankee baseball player, who said, predictions are always very difficult, especially about the future. So it's hard to say. There's so many things that are going on right now. Currently, worldwide, and crude oil is priced worldwide, and that's the number one cost in a gallon of gasoline is the crude oil price. And right now, crude oil supply is not keeping up with demand. And we saw a dip a couple of weeks ago in the crude oil prices, and that was the result of the new Omicron virus. And so worldwide, everybody thought that's going to shut us back down, and it's going to prevent air travel and all those kind of things. And it looks like it's not going to be that severe. So now that supply still hasn't caught up. The demand is coming back again from a couple of weeks ago. So prices are up. I think a prediction for 22. If we're looking at current gasoline prices, EIA today is reporting, I think, $3.20 average a gallon across the country, and crude oil prices are in the $75 range. All predictions are crude oil prices will be in that $65 to $80 range through 2022. So you can expect current prices, I think, for the year. There are some predictions that if without new variants coming along and limited air travel and those kind of countries shutting down, as we saw in 2020, not allowing travel and all, if those things don't happen, there are some predictions that crude oil prices could exceed $80 a barrel for an average in 2022, and that would then impact the price. So you're looking at probably another, maybe 20-30 cents a gallon on top of that.
In an open letter on your website by Board Chairman Harold Hamm, it states that America has all the natural gas and oil it needs for decades to come, but you're not producing it. Are there any policy changes to help you get production back to pre-pandemic levels?
Well, and actually that's a great question, Steve. Since 2020, early 2020, late 19, we have dropped our production in this country by around 2 million barrels a day. And at the same time, another thing that a lot of people don't pay attention to, in the end of 2020, beginning of 21, we lost about 700,000 barrels a day of refining capacity in this country. Those are refiners that are shut down. They're never going to come back. So that all enters into this. But yes, in fact, we have the ability to produce. What's happened to us with the incoming Biden administration a year ago was, canceling of the Keystone XL, a moratorium on federal leasing and federal production. That has now been lifted, and they say that they're leasing again, and they are. But then you've got to get permits, and and they're changing that. And the Department of Interior has now made a recommendation that they increase the royalty rates, so that means less profit for the companies to drill on those federal lands.
Jerry Simmons, thank you.
You bet, Steve. Thank you.
The CDC says Omicron now makes up roughly 95% of all new COVID cases in the United States. And the health agency has updated its isolation guidance to include a section on antigen tests. Last week, the CDC said the Omicron variant accounted for approximately 95.4% of all new CCP virus cases. 2 weeks ago, Omicron only made up about 38% of all new cases, suggesting that Omicron is highly contagious. What's more, the CDC has updated its isolation guidance. It now includes a section on antigen tests. The update says for people in quarantine, it's best to use an antigen test near the end of the 5-day period, but it does not say that those in quarantine have to test negative before coming out. Maryland's governor has declared a state of emergency and mobilized the Maryland National Guard in response to increased COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations in the state. A federal court grants a preliminary injunction to a group of 35 Navy Special Warfare Service members. They're suing the Biden administration for denying them a religious exemption to the COVID-19 vaccine mandate.
And then lastly, on the injunction, there's not a lot I can say about it, an issue which is under litigation, Bob. But as I said last night, we are aware, of course, of the injunction, and we're reviewing it and in discussions with the Department of Justice as to what options might be available to us going forward.
Among the group in the lawsuit are 26 Navy SEALs. The injunction stops the Department of Defense from taking any action against them for refusing the shot while the legal process plays out. The judge in the case wrote, "The Navy service members in the case seek to vindicate the very freedoms they have sacrificed so much to protect." He also says the pandemic does not give the government the right to sidestep constitutional freedoms. The lawsuit is related to the August mandate that says all military service members must be vaccinated. Texas Governor Greg Abbott is suing the Biden administration over the COVID-19 vaccine mandate for members of the National Guard. Abbott's lawsuit says that about 40% of Texas Army National Guard are refusing vaccination. The lawsuit says the mandate will cause harm. And Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt is taking similar action to stop the mandate in his state. The USS Abraham Lincoln deployed this week from San Diego under the command of Captain Amy Bauernschmidt, the first woman to lead a nuclear carrier in U.S. Navy history.
I consider it an honor and a privilege to be Abraham Lincoln's commanding officer. I am ready to lead the finest warship in the Navy into their next chapter. We have a deployment on top, time to make Lincoln Nation. Let's get after it.
Bauernschmidt previously served as the commanding officer of the Helicopter Maritime Strike Squad in the amphibious transport dock in San Diego. She has completed more than 3,000 flight hours during her career. The carrier deployed Monday from Naval Air Station North Island as part of the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. That's all we have for you tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more fair and unbiased news, direct to you straight from our nation's capital. Don't forget to stay up to date with all of the latest breaking news by following us on all of your favorite social media platforms. I'm Steve Lance. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.